Alrighty, yo, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy. This is DDG94 back with another reaction video. Today we finna react to ranking every Grand Theft Auto game by difficulty. So basically, it's like the hardest Grand Theft Autos. If I had to say the hardest, it'll probably be the PSP ports by far. Those are probably some of the hardest ones in the ones that I experienced. I can't speak for any of them. I can't speak for the first GTAs because I had GTA 2, but I rarely played that shit. That shit was garbage. I ain't gonna hold you. Grand Theft Auto 2 was garbage. I rarely played that shit. Especially when games like Driver existed back then. So like when you got games like Driver that exist, you kind of don't want to play any other. Nah. But yeah, I think from the ones I experienced, basically starting from like Grand Theft Auto 3 all the way up to 5 at this point. Minus I think there was a Game Boy Advance version, and I also think it was another version for the DS. What's it called? Chinatown? Yeah, I never played that either. So yeah. Excluding all those, I would probably say out of all of them, the most difficult ones was the ones that was on the PSP. But anyway, so without further ado, let's get right into this. Oh shit, my bad. My stupid ass. My stupid ass forgot to unmute the goddamn desktop.
Design. Make something too easy, it makes it boring. Make it too hard, it makes the whole thing frustrating. It's not the end-all be-all of a game, but it is one of the more important aspects that can make a good game great or make a great game annoying. So today, in a video format I totally didn't steal from my friend who himself totally didn't steal it from somebody else, we're going to be ranking the GTA games based on difficulty. I think it's fair to say that when it comes to the Grand Theft Auto series, most people don't really talk about the first two entries. Usually people only talk about the third game onwards, and aside from the fact that GTA 3 completely reinvented the series and was a revolutionary game in its own right, it's probably because the first two Grand Theft Auto games are very different compared to the later games as far as how they were structured. It's basically a more dolled up version of the game Postal. In this case, you have 6 individual sandbox levels, each with a different mission string, and the goal of each level is to get a certain amount of points per level to move on to the next, starting with 1 million and eventually getting up to 5 million. The primary means of doing this is by doing missions, but you can get points for doing pretty much any number of things. With that said, I rank the very first GTA game, as well as its expansion packs, as a 5 out of 5 difficulty. Why? Well, because everything about this game is designed to be as unfairly difficult as possible, intentionally or not. Sure, you're not meant to beat the levels on the first try, but even that is not the full story. You're only given a limited amount of lives per level, and you die or otherwise fail way too easily. If you so much as touch fire, you immediately drop dead. If you so much as touch a cop while you have a wanted level, you're arrested. You only have a single chance to do any mission. Each mission has a second half where you have to get back to a specific payphone within a time limit, otherwise you fail the mission. Navigation is difficult because there's no map screen and no way to see more than a couple feet in front of you. The game relies on this 360 movement system, which makes aiming with any level of precision nigh impossible. Plus,
bro, this shit, I ain't gonna lie. Having Grand Theft Auto 2, bro, that shit was ass. That's why I couldn't fuck with this game, bro. This shit was, like I said, bro, when you have games like Driver, you don't want to play games like this, bro.
the gameplay is generally janky. The cars control weird, the camera is not smooth. It's just not a polished experience to sit down and actually play top to bottom. I don't think there's any other way to put it than saying the original Grand Theft Auto is simply an obnoxiously hard game to play. I've never been able to reliably beat the game without cheats. I'm sure there's a lot of fun in this game for people who played it back in the day. Personally, I find it has a lot of issues, and almost every single one of those issues makes the game harder to play. GTA 2 is probably my least
My first ever GTA. I ain't gonna lie, bro. I gotta say it, bro.
3 letters.
1 word.
S.
Played game in the series, not for the fact that I think it's harder than the first game, but mostly because I never got around to it all that much. But from my limited sample size, I do think that GTA 2 is more accessible and more reasonable than the first game. It's more smooth in its gameplay with a much better feeling camera and car controls. It still has the same 360-degree movement system, which is a bit annoying, but the missions also tend to be much more reasonable in their difficulty on average. You have missions with 3 separate difficulty levels. I'll tease you by not telling you what those are. The goal is to get a certain amount of money, and you do that through missions with the different gangs. You need a certain amount of respect from those gangs to do said missions, which isn't difficult to get. All you need is to kill a couple of opposing gang members. Really, I think that's the most unrealistic part, is how easy it is to get a gang to forgive you just by killing the other gang. During this process, you also have the ability to save for the low price of $50,000. So there's much more mercy here than there was in the first game, except it still has one killer flaw. It still has a live system. That's right, if you die or get caught enough times, you have to go back to the last time you saved. It's still more reasonable than having to do it all over again, plus you're given an actual health bar this time around, which really helps, but it's still something I would prefer not be in the game. So the game is much more reasonable than the first game in its difficulty, because of gameplay improvements and tweaks, but it's still something that holds on to some of the aspects that made it obnoxious. So I would say the game rounds out to being roughly a 4 out of 5 on this scale. Grand Theft Auto 3 was the game that revolutionized.
If I had to rank this one, this would probably be a 4 out of. This would probably be a 4 out of 5. This shit was super difficult. I ain't gonna lie. When I was a kid, this shit was super difficult. Now the mission's kind of easy, but they're not all the way easy.
To the series, but it's still somewhat entrenched in the philosophies of the older games. That is to say, it still has some of the aspects that make it a bit harder than it should be. For example, cars are very brittle and blow up with only a few crashes.
Yep.
Enemies are extremely accurate and can drain your health in a second. Only a small handful of weapons have a lock-on feature, which makes your life difficult if you're playing with a controller. It's also the final game that doesn't have a full map in-game, which admittedly isn't that big of an issue with this game as it was with the first 2 games, on account of the fact that in 3D it's much easier to recognize the tangible space around you. Even still, this is a very short game. Going through in one shot, it's maybe 6 hours, but my first playthrough of the game took me roughly 20 hours because of how disadvantageous the gameplay can be at times, and how hard some of these missions can get, despite usually being simple. It's not quite as hard as the first game, but it's also not really in the realms of well-balanced difficulty just yet. So I would say it ranks a 4 out of 5 on the difficulty scale.
I agree.
GTA Vice City is an interesting one because while it's hard in the sense that there are some missions which end up being severe roadblocks, this is a game with a slightly more freeform structure where you don't have to do every single mission to get to the end of the game.
The only thing hard about Grand Theft Auto Vice City is the fucking business empire missions you gotta do. And the goddamn final mission. The final mission and all the Empire business franchise missions, them the only hardest ones. After that, pretty much after that, it's the rest of the game is pretty easy, bro.
You see, from about
Well, no, I'll take that back. I take that back. That fucking one mission with the plane, where you gotta control the plane and drop the bombs on them boats. That mission, I hate that mission.
the halfway point onwards, the linear mission string ends, and from that point you're given the ability to buy properties and turn them into profitable businesses. After you gain control of a certain amount of businesses, with a few being mandatory, you then unlock the final missions. And I'd say there's only a few really hard missions in this game. With that said though, a few of those really hard missions are on the mandatory path, most notably that final mission where you face off against 2 bosses you have to kill alongside 100 different goons that each do pretty significant damage. I would say the entire game, outside of a few missions including the final boss, have a difficulty of 2 out of 5. But then the few mandatory missions that are difficult are pretty damn difficult. I was prepared to give Vice City a nice comfortable 2 out of 5 overall, but I feel like because of these few divergences that do crank things up a bit, I feel like I have no choice but to give it a 3 out of 5.
That's fair. I would say 3 out of 5.
For me, it's kind of hard to articulate how hard it is to play
GTA 6, GTA San Andreas is kind of easy. Compared to the last 2, this shit is super easy. Except the 0 missions. But the 0 missions don't count. Like, they're not mandatory. Because if those 0 missions were mandatory, I would never have beat this game. Thank God they weren't mandatory, and I never will go back and do the missions, ever. It is what it is.
GTA San Andreas because I've played it so many times that I can pretty much recite it front to back. There's no doubt that there are a lot of individually difficult missions. Even then, I remember back in the day being able to beat most of these missions first try, and none of them are so bad that you can't beat them after a couple tries. With the possible exception of certain infamous missions like Air Raid, but then again, missions like that aren't necessary to beat the game, and if we're counting beating the game as simply getting to the end credits, then I don't honestly find this game all that difficult. In my most recent playthrough, I got through something like 80% of the game before needing to use a health cheat to get through a mission. And even then, I guarantee I could have beaten it on a second try. It's just a matter of my own time. Personally, ever since I was a kid, I don't think I ever struggled on any of the missions consistently, even the notoriously hard missions. That's not to say it's easy. There are no checkpoints, and for the most part, I can beat every mission, but sometimes just barely. So front to back, I think GTA San Andreas gets it just right, giving it a safe, comfortable 3 out of 5 difficulty.
I'll say it's a 2. I'll say it's a 2, but I understand. I never played this, so I can't speak
Grand Theft
on
Auto
it.
Advance for most of the game is relatively reasonable, even in spite of the primitive hardware. It goes back to a top-down style as it needed to for the sake of the hardware, but things do start to ramp up, and when they do, they ramp up hard. I would say the difficulty starts out at a 3, gets to a 4 as the game goes on, and then becomes almost impossible by the last couple missions. I speak no hyperbole when I say the last couple missions are some of the most unreasonably difficult missions I've ever experienced in a GTA game. Like that mission Smackdown, where you need to kill a specific number of gang members in a horrendously slim time limit, is something I tried maybe 20 times and simply could not do. Then you have the final mission where you need to go across town to the airport with a 6-star wanted level. I can't imagine getting a third of the way to the airport under those constraints without getting blown to Kingdom Come, let alone all the way. And when it comes to a game's difficulty for me, it kinda comes down to how easy the game is to beat. And if the game starts out reasonable and then becomes completely unreasonable by the end, then I think it's unreasonably difficult. Especially when the last couple missions will basically take as long to beat as the rest of the game combined, if you're able to beat it at all. So to me personally, I think Grand Theft Auto Advance is a 5 out of 5 in difficulty.
Damn. Alright, these is when the difficulty goes up.
My opinion on the GTA series as a whole, Liberty City Stories is the game of all time. It just kind of exists. It doesn't really do anything exceptionally, but it doesn't really...
I wouldn't say Liberty City Stories is hard, but there's a couple of missions that infuriate the fuck out of me. There's a couple of them that the mission where you gotta control dude car and kill all the mobsters before the car fucking blows up. Oh my gosh, shit. That is the most infuriating mission I think I've ever played.
Do anything badly either. I think it was one of those cases where it was a game that sort of got by on the fact that it was a GTA game on the go. which gave it a novelty that made up for its less interesting aspects. It's because of this that I can't honestly recall any particular high points or low points as far as the difficulty is concerned. To be honest, I can't remember much about this game at all. I vaguely remember a mission where you had to scare a leader of a union. I vaguely remember a somewhat annoying mission while Donald Love was on the campaign trail, but the fact that I played the game multiple times and I find
this
so
mission right here is
that I
a
can't remember
fucking
any
annoying.
particular moments says to me that this game is sort of a straight line of relative mundanity. And if I can't remember anything being particularly hard or easy, I guess I can't be too harsh either way. Then again, I do remember it being easier than it was hard, so I'm gonna play it safe and give it a 2 out of 5 on the difficulty scale.
I'll give it a 3. Okay, this is a 5. This is a 5. Probably a 4 out of 5, but this is, in my perspective, it's a 5.
Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories, or the best GTA game you never played. This is low-key a very difficult game, but not because the game has primitive mechanics or anything, but because the mission string is just pretty difficult. There are a couple of pieces to the mission string where they expect you to do a bit too much, with tons of enemies that damage you way too quickly, or have you in a relentless onslaught that goes on for a bit too long, or otherwise just don't give you enough time. Many people will say this is the most difficult one in the series. Everyone has a story of a different least favorite mission due to the relentless difficulty. Jive Drive, the mission where you pick up Lance from the airport, is one that I've made particular note of over the years.
I hate this mission.
Because it simply expects way too much of you. Is it a 5 out of 5 though? It straddles that line for sure. For me, the difference is, while I failed a few missions in this game a lot of times, I'm still able to beat the game. Meanwhile, things like GTA 1 or Advance are games I've never been able to beat legitimately, and are so hard that the process of doing so wouldn't be fun, and I feel like the basis of being a 5 out of 5 difficulty requires the difficulty itself to actively take away from the experience. But have I ever felt so frustrated by Vice City that it harms the enjoyment? At times, yes, but I still like the game overall. If I were to do half points, then this would be a 4.5 out of 5, but I guess since I'm not, the best I can do is be truthful and say that it does go at the bottom of 5. Yes, the game is harmed by its difficulty.
Right
It
spot.
doesn't ruin the game though. It's still a bomb-ass game.
Most infuriating one. Oh, super easy.
As
This
far
is
as
a 1.
difficulty is concerned, I never feel like GTA 4 ever gets as bad as it could. On one hand, it's
GTA 4, the DLC, and GTA 5, all one. All one. Super easy.
still felt like it was part of the old school in the sense that only one mission had a checkpoint in the middle, but on the other hand, it still feels like it was a degree easier than a lot of other games in the series. Because this was around the time when the entire industry was starting to trend towards easier games generally. That's why, while you have to redo entire missions if you fail, I feel like you usually don't have to as long as you're good. The game tended towards more cover-based combat, which means you usually couldn't be killed unless somebody got the drop on you. That said, the vehicle physics could be a bit fiddly to work with, and the game is super long, which means even if only a few missions require you to retry now and again, that still means the game is a bit hard to get through all the way just through sheer volume. It's such a hard thing to gauge because the difficulty is as conflicting as my opinion on the game. I guess I'll put it like this: as long as it is, I've never had trouble getting through the game. I'm leaning towards a 2 or a 3, but since once again I don't do half points, I guess I'll do the safe bet and say it's a 3 out of 5.
Nah,
But
it's
it's
a
one
1.
that very much borders on the line of 2 and 3.
It's super easy. This one is super easy.
Meanwhile,
Then
what
again,
do you
it's
get when
super
you
short
take the
too.
structure of GTA 4, base it around motorcycles instead of cars, and cut the length down by about 25 hours? You get GTA 4, The Lost and Damned. Apparently there's no second to the. Either way, I feel like The Lost and Damned is the type of sequel / standalone expansion that doesn't really change much. It bases itself around motorcycles, which are slightly more obnoxious to drive compared to cars, but the fact this game is so short also means that one of the biggest things about the main GTA 4 game that made me consider whether or not it deserved to be a 3 out of 5 is eliminated. The missions themselves are equally as easy, and unlike GTA 4, where I can think of at least a few missions that were moderately challenging, I can't think of any off the top of my head in The Lost and Damned. So while GTA 4 was a 3 straddling the line between 2 and 3, this one's an easy 2 out of 5.
I never played this, so
Grand Theft
I
Auto
wouldn't know.
Chinatown Wars is, to be quite frank, piss easy. I think they decided to overcompensate for the switch back to the top-down view. They made guns auto-lock, they made the enemy AI pretty much brain-dead, and they made every mission pretty self-explanatory and simple as far as the tasks are concerned. Even when you do get into the higher wanted levels and whatnot, I still find that the wanted levels are easy enough to dissipate, and they rarely throw enough at you to make it a truly meaty challenge. Even if they do, you can easily retry anything in an instant. I think there's maybe one mission that requires more than one try on average for me, and otherwise I can breeze through this game without much opposition or challenge pretty much at all. So Grand Theft Auto Chinatown Wars is the most unique game in the series and is also the easiest, making it an easy 1 out of 5 on the difficulty scale.
Damn. This one was super easy
Grand Theft Auto:
too.
The Ballad of Gay Tony, for some reason they dropped the 4 in the title, is the easiest of the 3 different modern Liberty City games, and that's for a few reasons. It has all the benefits of playing The Lost and Damned, that is to say a shorter campaign. That said, we're now given more focus on normal cars again, as well as helicopters. On top of that, this is the easiest game of the 3 to get to the end because the game is specifically designed with multiple playthroughs of different missions in mind. By which I mean, much like The Lost and Damned, you're given checkpoints here as well, but you're also graded at the end of every mission, so getting a perfect score is a bit annoying, but because there's a minimum level of completion, that means the basis of this, that is how easy it is to get to the end credits, is actually really easy. Super easy. Probably because there's multiple levels of success, so scraping by at a minimum level is damn easy. I don't remember any particular missions I struggled with, and on top of that, you don't even need to do all the missions in one shot. There aren't even that many missions to begin with, so all around I think this is a game that, while fun, pretty much eliminates all the difficulty from the base game. So I think it's a 1 out of 5 on the difficulty scale. I've made it no secret that I'm not a fan of GTA 5. I don't hate it, but I find it to be a game that attempts to be the bridging point of every single game in the GTA series, and as a result it feels like a hodgepodge of things.
This shit is super fucking easy. This shit is so fucking easy. I think I beat this game in like, I literally think I beat this game the first day I got it. I really beat this game the first day I got it. I speed ran through this shit. And I didn't even realize that I was speed running through this shit. The first day I bought this game back in 2013. Put that in my PlayStation 3 and went and played this shit all day, all night. Beat the game in one sitting. And that's how fucking easy it was.
That are done well, with nothing done particularly great. Even the fact that it has 3 main characters illustrates the game's tendency to attempt to do everything and ends up doing kind of nothing. And I feel like this plays into the difficulty as well. I don't think anything is particularly developed enough for it to be particularly hard. The most difficult thing about the game is the fact that you die very quickly, but your health also regenerates up to about halfway by itself, which is something that no other game in the series has done so far. It remains to be seen if this will happen in GTA 6. So if I had to put a pin in it, and I do, I feel like the fact that it is easy to die if you get caught up in any negative situation means that the game can't be a 1 out of 5. But it's also, much like the Ballad of Gay Tony, possible to restart instantly, and there are also checkpoints and multiple levels of success, meaning that while getting full points in every single mission may be a bit hard, just getting to the end is pretty easy. Plus, I think the difficulty scale for every mission is fairly consistent. There's nothing I can remember as being particularly harder than any other mission. So I think GTA 5 can slot itself right into a comfortable 2 out of 5 on the difficulty scale.
That's a 1.
Grand Theft Auto: The Trilogy, the Definitive Edition, has a name.
They super dumbed down. They super dumbed down the OG trilogy games with the definitive edition. The definitive edition of Grand Theft Auto is super dumbed down, super easy.
Difficulty of 5 on account of the fact that it's about twice as long as it needs to be. But as far as the rest of the game as a whole, there's one thing you can say about it as far as how it differentiates itself from the original releases difficulty-wise. It adds checkpoints and retries to the missions. It also has a modern GTA-style feature where the GPS will show you the quickest route of where you need to go. These changes don't necessarily make the missions easier, but they do at least make the process of doing them more expedient in the sense that you don't need to reacquire weapons or drive back. Plus, it also means that longer missions are easier to do on account of not needing to do all of them in one shot. Because that was the most difficult aspect of the original run of GTA games, the fact that almost all missions had to be done in one shot. So if there's one thing I can say positively about the GTA Remastered trilogy, it's that they do make the games slightly more accessible to newcomers this way. So in that sense, I do actually think it brings the difficulty balance down to a nice comfortable 2 out of 5. Why 2? Because this feature knocks every game down by a point, meaning it's 3-2-2, so it averages out to about a 2.
Okay.
Now, I could stop here, but while I'm here, I might as well also include some games adjacent to the GTA universe. Games that aren't part of the series, but are set in the same universe, which I think only applies definitively for 3 games.
But Bully? Yeah, I know Bully is part of...
First of all, we have Bully, one of my favorite games, even though there's no doubt in
I've only played this once. I've never got a chance to finish this, though, because this was like a Blockbuster rental for me. I never got a chance to finish this game.
My mind that it's pretty easy. In fact, at this point, I can reliably beat the game without failing almost any missions. If anything, the hardest thing to do would be the classes in the game, and those are optional. The game is fun, and the mechanics are very well designed pretty much all the way through, but in an attempt to make the game the true GTA for kids, or at least a younger audience than GTA, it ends up being much more easy in a way that you may not even notice how easy it is. I'm genuinely trying to remember if there's anything that stands out as being notably easier or harder than you might be used to. I'm drawing a blank, so this is an easy 1 out of 5, but don't take that as a statement on the game's quality. It's still one of my favorite games.
I've never played Manhunt.
It's a bit of an odd case as far as how I recall it, because on one hand, I've only played it through one time, unlike all the other games in this list, which I've played through at least twice. The only exception would be the following game, Manhunt 2. But at least I played through Manhunt 2 fairly recently, so the first Manhunt game is probably the game I remember the least about of all these games. But I do remember...
I've never played Manhunt. Never played it. I've seen my cousins play it. I wasn't it. I saw my cousins play it. It didn't interest me at all.
Remember how difficult it gets towards the end. I think it's another one of those games that kind of straddles the line between manageably difficult and obnoxiously difficult, because it's pretty manageable for most of the game, but then towards the very end of the game, I find it gets a bit annoying. Especially with that final boss and the sequence following the final boss. I was considering giving it a 4, but then I remembered that I was actually quick saving and quick loading pretty frequently in the back half of the game, especially once guns were introduced. I'm on a schedule. Sue me. So I think if you're cheesing it a bit with the quick saving and quick loading, it's a 4 out of 5, but if you're expected to play through all these levels checkpoint to checkpoint, which is the intended way to play, then I think it would be a 5 out of 5. Maybe if I played through a couple more times, it would eventually drop its way to a 4 out of 5, but I definitely had more trouble with the first Manhunt game than pretty much any other game among this collection. Manhunt 2, despite its issues and despite the fact that it was rushed and cut down, I think is actually the superior game of the two in many ways, up to and including the difficulty. It's still difficult, it still has some slightly unreasonable segments, especially in the fact that they introduce more mechanics that you have to pay attention to, but I find that the ride overall has a smoother, more fair progression. There's no segment I can think of where I couldn't handle what was going on. Even the final boss was easy compared to Pigsy, so while still a bit on the tougher side, it's more reasonable and has a closer approximation to the difficulty that you would expect for a game like this without going over the top. I would say it's a 4 out of 5 on the difficulty scale. Now I know what some of you are going to say, what about insert game here? To my knowledge, every other game among the Rockstar Games catalog is set in their own distinct universes. Bully and the Manhunt games have actual in-game context to suggest they're part of the GTA universe, while things like Red Dead, LA Noire, Smuggler's Run, and so on don't have any proof of existence within the GTA universe outside of Easter eggs like the ability to have John Marston as a father in GTA Online. Though I'm happy about that because it means I have an excuse not to include them here, and quite frankly, I haven't played a bunch of those. Red Dead Redemption 2, for example, I know I would love, but that game is notoriously long and my time is at a premium. The same goes for LA Noire, and I don't personally much care for the Smuggler's Run games.
I never heard of
Let's cut
that.
it off here. And now that we're done, let's arrange these in what I consider to be proper order. Pretty interesting lineup. I think when I've done this previously, the rankings of each game's difficulty tended to somewhat coincide with how much I liked the games, but in this case it's all over the place. There are games I like and dislike in pretty much every one of the difficulty rankings. Really, I think it's 2 and 4 that don't seem to house any of my favorite games in the series, but I guess as you get to the more extreme levels of difficulty, the games I would consider good ended up being the ones that managed to subvert either the high or low difficulty through unique fun design. Bully and Chinatown Wars, despite being very easy, are a few of my favorite games because they are unlike pretty much any other game you'll ever play. And while Vice City Stories isn't quite as unique, it still has a lot of unique ideas that make it stand out despite its difficulty. But lo and behold, my 2 favorite games of all included find themselves right in the middle. So there might be a bit of familiarity in that respect, and that was every game in the GTA series and beyond ranked by difficulty. I have been the King of Snark Style right here on Tactical Bacon Productions.
Alrighty, that's just gonna about do it for this one, most definitely. I say this is a pretty accurate list, minus a couple games I've never played. I think that GTA 4 and GTA 5 is all ones, in my personal opinion. Super easy. The Definitive Edition, they dumbed that shit down tremendously, but he did put that in the right spot. I would put that at 2. Still sort of semi-difficult, but they dumbed it down to the point where it's like, you can get past these missions. Especially considering the fact that you got checkpoints. It helps. But anyways, just gonna about do it for this one. I will see you all in the next video. Till then, deuces.